I say welcome back. It's good to be back working on the Jewel. Haven't seen you all summer. Had a great summer, so I've met a lot of nice tourists. Had a great time, but it took away the time I needed to work on the Jewel. For the last month now, I've been hitting it pretty hard, and this is the most difficult part. What I'm doing right now is trying to get this body as perfect as I can. The new paint today is completely unforgiving. Back in the old days, if you had a little chip or a little nick, the paint was thick enough it would fill it up, and that was fine. It wasn't a big deal. But today, the new paint is so thin that if you got a little chip or a little nick in there that you didn't fix, it's going to show up. So you have to go back until you get them all done. As you can see right here, where I've been putting little spots of putty here and there, right here and right over here. You see these little black marks where I've been going around marking this stuff. This is the hardest part. And now, this is my second primer guide coat, if you're familiar with that. And what it is I put on 3 good coats of primer. I gave it a guide coat, which is a slight, small mist of black, and I sanded it all down. The black shows where the scratches are. And this is the second time I've done that. Now this time, I'm going to prime it one more time now. 2 coats of primer, dual stage primer, and give it another guide coat, and I should be ready for paint. So that means that by the end of this week, by the time I get it apart, whatever, I can start painting the door jambs, I can paint the firewall, I can paint the trunk, and I can start getting everything ready to go back together and get the motor back in permanently. I can start working on the dash. There's a lot of things I can do once I get all that when I get those body parts all painted the color we need. Now, my problem is I want to paint this candy apple fire red, which was a very popular paint back in the 60s and 70s. When I talked to Jim, he said that's exactly what he wanted. It was very popular. Everybody liked that paint. I painted everything fire red. Painted my kid's tricycle fire red. Everything was fire red. There's only one company in the United States that makes it anymore so far that I have found. I have been all over, and I haven't contacted them to find out if they've got it, but they list it as having candy apple fire red. And it is the most beautiful red. It just glows, and that's the color we want to paint it. That's what Jim wanted, and I'm really looking forward to that. But and it's not really that expensive either, as long as they've got it. If they don't have it, then I'm really in trouble. I'm going to have to think of something else. So that's where we're at. That's where we're going. We're talking about paint. Once we get the paint on this car, it's simply a matter of starting to bolting it back together, making everything work. And at the end of the day, we've got the Jewel all done, ready to go to the car show. The last time we talked, I was getting ready to fix these rear fenders. As you remember, they had been cut out way up here for really big tires, and I had to put that back to get that original body line back in there. And I couldn't find new pieces to replace that with, and I couldn't even find used 2-door pieces, so my good friend Art Dalcom found me a 4-door sedan that I used to make these pieces. It just caused me a lot more work. So what I did is I just started back here where I had a little bit of the fender, and I welded that back in, welded it back up here, then it came down and I welded this piece in here to get this line all correct. Then I had to there was a little hole here that was missing on the 4-door body that I had no metal. So I wish you could have seen it because it was a lot of work. But I just made a new piece to fit in here, welded that back in, and that filled that hole in. And then down here, there was a pretty good sized rust hole down in here. So I just cut that all out real nice and replaced this whole bottom section and replaced that whole rocker panel. And it wasn't anything really hard. It was just a lot of welding, a lot of work. Because like I said, you can't use a wire feed on this stuff because it's so old and it's so contaminated, the weld doesn't fit very good. So you gotta steel weld everything, and that's old school for me, so that's the way it works. But once we got this done, this was, I have to admit, this was the hardest part. This was the most work. Because this was just such old, wore out material. It was just so hard to get it straight. And I just had to keep going back until I finally got it where it looks pretty good. Perfect, no, but just really nice. It's going to look really good. And then we've got the coup de resistance here. I did find, buried in my stash of stuff, a set of Foxcraft full-length Fender skirts, which are otherwise known as cruiser skirts. And they fit over this completely, and I'll show you what one looks like. Fits over this completely. It comes clear back here to the bumper. Covers this whole section. And so I kind of mocked it up before I brought it in here, and I put tires on it, set it on the ground, put those Fender skirts on here, and the clearance is about this much. It's just awesome. Wait till you see it when I get it done. It just makes the whole car look long and sleek and just awesome. And so I'm just really looking forward to getting those skirts done and getting this thing put together to see what that's going to look like. These skirts, I don't think they make them new anymore, but you see them on eBay for sale once in a while. And they're not too expensive, $300-400 a pair, but they sure look good on this car. And before Jim passed, I asked him if he had ever considered putting cruiser skirts on it, and he said, well, Billy said, I wanted to, I had a set, but he says, I'm not a body man, and I didn't know how to do it, and I couldn't find anybody that would put those skirts on there, so it never had skirts, but he said, I would really like to put skirts on it. Now, he told me that before he passed away. And so, Jim, I hope if you're listening, we are going to satisfy that wish. We are going to put those skirts on there. And this car is going to look like the custom show car that it should be. This is a Foxcraft cruiser skirt. And both of these skirts that I have for this car were very rough condition. And for those of you who've done body work, you'll say, oh my God, look at all that Bondo. Well, in all honesty, guys, when they're this bad, this is the easiest way to do it. Granted, I'm using a lot of Bondo, but by the time I get done, most of this will be on the floor. And I'll have a nice straight skirt, and that's what I'm after. So this is my second coat. I had a basic ground coat first to give me something to stick to. This is my second coat. I'll sand this down with some 80 grit paper, and then I'm going to block that down, and then I'm going to prime it when I prime the car, and by then when I get done with that, it should be ready for paint. So don't have a heart attack about all that Bondo. It won't be there when I get it on the car. Not all of it anyway, but some of it. So that's just the easiest way to do it. As we talked before about the Jewel, I honestly don't think that this part of the car was ever completed. Maybe it was, but I'm not too sure because nobody's got any pictures. We just all we have is kind of a word of mouth as to what kind of taillights they were. But Jim told me that this is kind of what they had in mind to do. Now this is the second template I made out of plexiglass to fit it in here. And this is the second one. The first one, I broke that one. This is a very crude way of doing business. And then this is the third one. And this is the one that I finally figured it out. When I started this job, I'm like anybody else. I went looking for people that knew how to do this. And I was looking for advice how to do this. And nobody knew how to cut 1/8" plexiglass. They said, well, you take your piece and then you score it, which means you just put a great big deep scratch and then you break it off. Well, how the hell do you do that when you get up here around this corner, I said. Well, you'll have to make all these little marks and break them off a little piece at a time. And I said, oh my God. So I tried everything. I tried a Sawzall. I tried, a saber saw. I tried just about every kind of saw that I could imagine. No luck, because the blades would get hot and they'd melt the plexiglass. So I wasn't getting anywhere. So I usually do my best thinking about 3 o'clock in the morning, like most of you do. And I'm thinking, if I can get this laid out on a piece of plexiglass, and if I can keep that blade in that saw cool, I should be able to cut that. Well, let's try it. So I set everything back up again, and I got me a squirt bottle, and I got my little saw, and I start cutting with a saw, and I'm squirting, and I'm cutting, and I'm squirting, and I'm cutting, and I cut this piece out, and it worked perfect. It just made a nice, even cut. I could follow the line, nothing melted, and I thought, aha, now we're on to something. So then I took this template, and I laid it on my old plexiglass, and I made another template. This one, I made another one because this one didn't fit right. and I marked it all out, and I got out my saw, and I got my little squirt bottle, and I'm cutting and I'm squirting and I'm cutting and I'm squirting and I'm going all the way around, and it just came apart perfect. I couldn't believe it. So let this be a lesson to you people that are ever going to use 1/8" fiber or plexiglass and anything. You can cut it with a saw as long as you keep that blade cool. Just keep that blade wet, keep it cool, and you can cut this stuff like nothing. So what I did, I cut this all out, and then I set it up in here, and I slowly started sanding off these edges to get it to fit right. And this piece just fits perfect right. There is going to be a tail light back here underneath this. Now this will be red. This plexiglass will be red. And I'm going to put a tail light under here, just a regular tail light. And then I'm going to put some bulbs in the body right behind here, 4 of them. But I'm not going to use any reflectorized or anything. I just want it to glow. I don't want it to be real bright. There won't be any brake light. It'll just be a real nice red glow coming from this part right here. So it's not going to be a real earth-shaking thing, but I think it's going to look good with the tail lights. This lit up, not real bright, but just where you can see a nice glow. And I think that's just going to be a real nice addition to the car. I want to thank all you folks that are taking the time to watch these videos. This has been a new deal for me. I'm kind of a shy, recluse guy back here working by myself for the last 20, 30 years. I don't really get a lot of company, but that's okay. I've enjoyed doing this, enjoyed talking to you, and I hope you're enjoying the videos. And now you're going to get to see some real progress. The next time you see this now, this car is going to be you're going to see us take this car apart. My good friend Mike Prios, my little Greek friend, is going to come help me take this thing apart. And we're going to get to working on getting the door jambs and the firewall painted and getting this stuff lined up. So the next time you see this, we're going to be taking this baby apart, getting to make some real progress with paint work. Once we get the paint work done, then we can put the motor in, we can start hooking all that stuff up, get the dash painted, put the dash in. Lots and lots of things we can do once we get this thing apart, get this stuff all painted up and get it ready to put back together. It'll start moving pretty fast then, and you're going to see some really exciting things about this car. I think this is an important part of the history of Rapid City, the history of Western South Dakota. These old custom cars that were built back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, such a part of our lives back then, such a part of history that we just can't let them fall by the wayside. And this is about the last one. And so this thing, it's coming back, it's coming alive, and it's going to be well worth seeing and being around when we get it done. So hope to see you in the next video.